Please consider becoming a patron of Myth Vision Podcast. You'll get early access to every video, including this amazing one, and you can ask me personal questions, private message me, anything you'd like. Professor John J. Collins, I've got a good friend who's anonymous. I cannot say his name. If I do, the whole world will... No, I'm just kidding. He's got a list of questions, so I guess I'll go through them. Okay. We'll just chip at them.
Yeah.
Do DNA studies show no difference between Jews and surrounding Middle Eastern peoples? And inside, it was DNA that disproved the Book of Mormon's claim the American Indians were descended from the Middle East.
I don't know anything about the DNA evidence.
Okay. Do either... and I think he's referring to you and Dr. Baden, but believe the Exodus occurred as described in the Old Testament. If not, what probably did happen, which we kind of talked about this.
Well, yeah. I'm sure there were Hebrew slaves who escaped from Egypt from time to time. Now, I don't think you got one big one. There certainly was no record of a pharaoh chasing after them and a pharaoh getting drowned in the process of trying to catch runaway slaves. No self-respecting pharaoh would go after runaway slaves. So, there may well be a nucleus. Ron Hendel's kind of cultural memory could fit in nicely to that. But it does not seem to have accounted for a big part of the makeup. I think myself that something that contributed to the importance of the Exodus story is that Jeroboam, who is supposedly the founder of the Northern Kingdom, had fled from Solomon and been a slave and been in Egypt. And then when Solomon died, he came back from Egypt. And I think he may have promoted the story of the Exodus.
Interesting. There's something there, probably.
There's probably something there.
Wow. And who knows how long? I mean, these peoples have been in and out of Egypt for...
Yeah.
There's no telling how big this legend...
Yeah.
Okay. What does current scholarship think about the theory first proposed by Albrecht Alt, that the settlement of Palestine by Jewish ancestors was a gradual process by Highlanders gradually displacing Canaanites living on the lowlands closer to the Mediterranean?
Well, that when I was a student, there were two rival theories. That John Bright, in his History of Israel, more or less went with the biblical account. The conquest happened. And Alt and Martin Noth had the idea, no, it was gradual infiltration. Now, the balance of the argument has favoured Alt and Noth, with the difference that I think Alt would still have thought that they came in from Mesopotamia or from the east, and nowadays the archaeologists think, no, they were Canaanites. That they were just a group within Canaan who withdrew from the lowlands and developed their own identity up in the hills.
Like Britons who came to America, did their own thing.
And settled in Appalachia.
Okay, how does current scholarship respond to the theory advanced by Martin Noth that the books from Judges through Kings were composed by one author?
I think Noth was right. This is no guarantee that everybody realizes this. I think Joel would probably agree with me on that. I think that was a very good hypothesis. Now, when you say composed, we don't mean composed from scratch.
Right.
But that there is clear sign of editing that ties these books together.
Interesting. Was Deuteronomy the scroll found in the temple during the reign of Josiah, as mentioned in 2 Kings and 2 Chronicles? Some scholars have advanced this hypothesis.
Well, yes. I mean, the story in 2 Kings implies that the book of the law of the Lord was found and implies that it was Deuteronomy. Now, that doesn't mean it was Deuteronomy in the form that we have it, but at least the law of centralization seems to have been a crucial part in it. So I would think that, yes, there's a nucleus of Deuteronomy that went back. Now, whether it was found in the temple, that's another question. This whole thing could be a fiction. but I think it does go back to the time of Josiah.
How do scholars know Isaiah was composed of 3 segments? Chapters 1 through 39, and correct if this is not correctly, chapters 1 through 39, 40 to 55, and 56 to 66.
Putting it simply, not everything in 1 to 39 was composed by one author. There is a block of material in chapters 7 to 9, say, that is very clearly set at the time of an Assyrian crisis. Talks about the northern kingdom threatening to invade Jerusalem to form an alliance to resist the Assyrians. And there are some other passages later in the book that also relate to that. So some of it goes back to around 700. Now, in 40 to 55, the context is very clear. It even mentions Cyrus of Persia by name. Couldn't be clearer than that. 56 to 66, not everyone would agree that that's separate, but it seems to presuppose a situation when the exiles have come back to Jerusalem. Disillusionment has set in to some degree, whereas in 40 to 55 it's all very enthusiastic and we're being restored, everything is great. And then by 56 to 66 there's a lot of internal division. And so that's why many people think it's later, perhaps disciples of 2nd Isaiah. If it's the same person, it's later.
Thank you. Why do mainstream scholars believe Ruth, Esther, and Jonah are examples of Jewish fiction?
Well, they read like fiction. They read like novels. Now, in the case of Jonah, of course, now we all have to reconsider, now that we've heard of a man actually being swallowed by a whale and then spat up. Now,
yeah, because that's true,
But I think, the case, there's all sorts of stuff in Jonah that gives you pretty broad hints that this is a fiction.
In that fiction, it does carry some theological value, I think. And what I mean by that is, in that whole discussion about the perception of the nations, this seems late in the game because I don't know, when would you date it? Because it sounds like he's being told, go to not just any nation, like the nation that destroyed Israel. And God's concerned about them, according to this author.
Well, it's a great book. And it's a funny book. And it's meant to be funny. But it's like the story of Adam and Eve. If you find a talking snake in a story, come on, who's going to believe that? If this weren't in the Bible, nobody would take it literally.
Right.
And the same with Jonah. And that's just a genre mistake. There are clear signals. Don't take this literally.
Yeah.
Now, Esther, again, that there's a lot of obvious hyperbole, I think, in Esther. The idea that the Persian king gives the Jews permission to kill any of their enemies that they want for a period of time is very plausible. The whole thing is told with a certain gusto. But, that there could be a historical core to that. In the case of Ruth, you see, this is what you might call a private story. You're not going to get any record that will confirm or contradict the story of Ruth. It's a story about a private individual. Now, normally those things are novellas, novels, short stories, fictions.
Interesting, thank you.
But, does it make any difference if it actually happened?
Right, and there's a lot of times politics are what we see happening often in all of this material. It's rare to find politics not play a role. It's interesting. And Cyrus the Great being the Messiah, does this play any significance in this whole Esther thing? In this Esther?
No, not in Esther.
One last comment on this I'd like to say is I read Adiofir Ishai Rosenzweig book Goy on the Israel's others, and when we talk about Ezra, the way that he is towards others, and he's like, it's clear that they're not to mingle and mix seed with these foreign strange wives.
Yeah.
there's a list of the nations you're not supposed to.
Yeah.
And so we would call that xenophobia or xenophobic or some type of don't mix, don't marry. However, they said something interesting in their book. They said it's not everyone. It's only these listed people. Whereas like the people that conquered them, that they're actually living in their land and stuff with, they're not naming like, don't marry these people. There's only certain people that they're saying not to mingle with. So it's like a political slant of saying like, you and me, we're not to, let's not marry Indians or let's not marry this. But, you know, English people and these other people, we're cool with these guys, so we can marry them.
Yeah, and you know, by and large, you don't want interaction with the proximate neighbour. Somebody who comes from, you know, the other side of the moon, fine. But it's the immediate neighbour you want to get away from.
And that's so true sociologically in every group. All the Jews that argue amongst themselves about their interpretations, all the Christians, stay away from them, but they are cool with all this other, anything that's not too close.
Yeah.
Too close for comfort.
Yeah.
Thank you.